If you watched my video on the immense wealth of Mansa Musa, then you might remember that I mentioned his predecessor, Abu-Bakr Keita II. Now, Mansa Abu-Bakr was the brother of Musa. He was a keen traveller and explorer, and with his thirst for discovery, he left Musa in charge of the entire Mali Empire while he went on this ambitious voyage across the Atlantic Ocean. Now, in medieval Europe, there was a common notion that the Atlantic Ocean was the edge of the world, and that any travel westward would ultimately result in either an endless journey until you died of dehydration or starvation, or being devoured by some kind of mythical sea creature. Either way, it was bad news. But Islamic thinkers at the time thought differently. They theorized that there was a lot to be discovered, and since Abu Bakr's childhood, this was something that had piqued his interest, and he wanted to find out for himself. So he put together a fleet and he sent them out in search of land. Much later, when Musa was given charge of the Mali Empire, he actually told the story of Mansa Abu-Bakr when he was on that famous Hajj to Mecca. Now, if none of this is making sense to you, then go back and check out that video. I'm going to link it here, I think, and then make sure you come straight back to this one. But when Mansa Musa stopped off in Egypt, he spoke to an Arab historian by the name Shihab al-Umari, where he said, "The monarch who preceded me would not believe that it was impossible to discover the limits of the neighbouring sea. He wished to know. He persisted in his plan. He caused the equipping of 200 ships and filled them with men, and of each such number that were filled with gold, water, and food for 2 years. He said to the commanders, 'Do not return until you have reached the end of the ocean or when you have exhausted your food and water.'" Abu Bakr was already a well-travelled and well-educated man, and there was no doubt that he wanted to spread the influence and culture of the Mali Empire far beyond the African shoreline. It's said that the crew not only consisted of sailors, but also builders and traders, as well as scholars and even artists. This was a man who was not only confident that there was land to be found, but also that that land could signal the beginning of another phase of expansion for the Mali Empire. Now, this journey would ultimately be unsuccessful. Of the 200 ships that set sail, only one would return, with the captain claiming that the fleet had come across what seemed to be a river flowing through an open ocean. He'd watched the other ships disappear into its broad current, and rather than following them into what would have been an inevitable end, he made the sensible choice to turn the ship around and take his men back to the Mali Empire. Now, this would technically be Abu Bakr's first attempt at discovering what lay beyond the Atlantic Ocean, and quite frankly, it would pale in comparison to his second attempt. For this, he expanded the fleet from 200 to 2,000 ships, and for this trip, Abu Bakr made himself the commander, because everybody knows if you want a job doing properly, then you've got to do it yourself. And to be fair to him, he did it in style. He had the flagship built specifically for his own needs, including a lavish throne as its centerpiece, because of course no emperor can be without his throne. Instructing that if he should not return, Musa would inherit the empire, Abu Bakr set off along the Senegal River in the year 1311, and ultimately he would never return to Mali. Musa would become the emperor just a year later in 1312. Just a reminder that Abu Bakr set off on his journey nearly 200 years before Christopher Columbus did in 1492. So you might ask, why is his story not as famous as Columbus? And maybe the obvious answer is that he never completed the journey. What with the previous fleet all but perishing, and the fact that Abu Bakr was never seen again, it could be reasonable to presume that he'd suffered the same fate. But the truth is, we just don't know whether or not Abu Bakr himself actually set foot on American soil. What we do know, however, is that there is strong evidence to suggest that West Africans certainly made it to American shores around this time. How do we know this? Well, Columbus told us himself. In his journal, he documented conversations with the Native Americans, and he confirmed that black-skinned people had come from the southeast in boats, trading gold-tipped spears. The natives described the spearheads as guanin, which either comes from the Taino people, the indigenous people of the Caribbean, or from the Mandinkan language, the language of the Mali Empire. And to strengthen the case, chemical analysis suggests that the most likely source of the gold was indeed West Africa. So, was it possible that Abu Bakr landed in the Caribbean before moving northwards towards mainland America? Columbus also noted that the Native Americans he came across were wearing handkerchiefs which were strikingly similar to what could be found in West Africa. So picture the scene. You're Christopher Columbus and you've just completed the journey that will give you legendary status back home in Italy and throughout Europe, only to hear stories from the locals that black-skinned traders had visited them long ago, leaving them with goods that quite literally wouldn't be out of place in West Africa. How confident would you be that you were in fact the first foreign contact they'd ever had. Okay, so Columbus wasn't the first person to discover the Americas. So what we say, maybe the first European? Nah, not even close. In the 1960s, Viking settlements were found in Newfoundland, Canada, which predate Columbus by 500 years. And this also supports a lot of Norse tales, particularly that of Leif Erikson, or Leif the Lucky as he was known, who was an explorer most likely from Iceland. And an Irishman by the name of St. Brendan the Navigator is thought to have made the journey around 500 years before that. Now, to be fair, the story goes that he was in search of the Garden of Eden, and this one is shrouded in mythology and mystery. But we can know with a fair amount of certainty, and pretty much by his own admission, that Christopher Columbus wasn't the first. So look, you could argue that Abu-Bakr Keita II was just another in a long list of travellers setting out across the Atlantic. And that's fair enough, but then maybe the same argument could be made for Columbus. If you've somehow got this far and you don't know the incredible story of Mansa Musa, then go and have a look at this video. Oh, and don't forget to drop a like on this one and on that one, and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. And I'll see you on the next one.